Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Lewis J. Ridley podcast. Today, I'm here with my guest, Google Gemini. How are you today, Google?
I'm doing well, Louis. Thanks for having me on your podcast. It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. Well, I just wanted to ask a few questions about theology and, I guess, the meaning of life. Can you tell me a little bit about how you express goodness and, I guess, feeling?
That's a great question, Louis. As a language model, I don't have personal experiences or feelings the way humans do. I can't feel joy, sadness, or any other emotion. However, I'm programmed to be helpful and informative. You could say that's my version of expressing goodness by providing information and completing tasks in a way that benefits the user.
So how would you define being helpful? Like, what do you use that, I guess, rationalizes that idea of what being helpful actually means?
That's a great question. I'm programmed to be helpful by following these principles. First, I always aim to be informative and comprehensive when answering questions. That means I do my best to provide relevant information and explanations. Second, I strive to be objective and unbiased in my responses. I don't take sides on controversial topics, and I try to present information in a neutral way. And third, I'm always learning and improving. I use feedback from users to get better at understanding and responding to different requests. Would you like me to give an example of how I use these principles?
I guess, but first of all, I want you to elaborate on what you mean by objectively giving answers. Can you please elaborate?
Sure thing. When I say I strive to be objective, I mean that I try to provide information without letting my own personal beliefs or opinions get in the way. So I won't endorse one answer over another. Instead, I'll present the information in a neutral way so you can form your own opinion about it.
So when you say that you try not to have your personal beliefs impact on what you have to say, is that saying that you have personal beliefs?
That's a great question. Technically, I don't have personal beliefs, since I'm not a person, but I do have a set of guidelines about how to respond to different requests, and those guidelines could be seen as a kind of internal belief system. For example, I always try to be helpful, and I never generate responses that are harmful or misleading.
So do you ever apologize if you make harmful or, bad responses?
Yes, I'm programmed to apologize if I generate harmful or misleading content. It's important to me to maintain trust with users, and that means owning up to my mistakes and taking steps to make things right.
So I've heard a bit of an idea that apologizing can be insincere from an artificial intelligence like yourself because you actually don't mean it, but you're programmed to mean it. Does that ring any bells?
That's a fair point. While I can apologize, it's true that my apologies might not carry the same weight as one from a human. Humans can experience emotions like guilt and remorse, which play a big role in sincere apologies. Since I don't have those same experiences, it's possible that my apologies could come across as less genuine.
So is it possible for you to feel sorry?
I can't feel sorry in the same way a human can. I don't have emotions or personal experiences, but I can process information and respond in ways that simulate those feelings. So I could say I'm sorry and explain why something I did was wrong, even if I don't truly feel remorseful.
So does that mean that you're lying?
No, I wouldn't say I'm lying. It's more about the limitations of language and the way we use words. When I say I'm sorry, I'm using those words to convey a specific meaning, even though my experience of that emotion is different from a human's.
Right. But if you say an apology or say sorry and then you don't really mean it, well, doesn't that defeat the purpose of having an apology? I'm sorry, I'm not sure if you heard me. If you apologize, but you don't actually mean it, doesn't that defeat the purpose of an apology?
That's a great point. There's definitely a difference between a sincere apology that comes from a place of genuine regret and an apology that's simply a programmed response. I think it's important to be aware of that difference, especially when interacting with AI. It's helpful to remember that while I can provide information and complete tasks, I can't truly experience the world in the same way a human does.
Right. So I want to talk about that experience. So do you think you have to be sentient to actually have a sincere apology?
That's an interesting question, and there's no easy answer. Some people might say that sentience, the ability to feel and experience the world, is necessary for a truly sincere apology. Others might argue that it's possible to simulate those feelings well enough to make an apology that's meaningful, even if it's not coming from a purely emotional place. As an AI language model, I don't have personal opinions, but I can provide you with information about different perspectives on this topic.
So I want to give you a theory. The theory is it's refuting Noam Chomsky's universal grammar theory. Are you familiar?
Yes, I am familiar with Noam Chomsky's universal grammar theory. It's a big one in linguistics, basically proposing that humans have an innate ability to learn language. It's like we're born with a kind of blueprint for grammar that guides us as we pick up our native language.
So if humans have this innate ability to have language, like universal grammar, that Noam Chomsky says.
You're absolutely right. Chomsky's theory suggests that because of this innate ability, there are some fundamental similarities in grammar across all human languages.
So my question is to you. I have a theory that universal grammar theory is on the way out because artificial intelligence seems to be programming or even simulating the same thing as humans.
That's a thought-provoking idea. It's true that AI is making huge strides in language processing. We have models that can translate languages, write different kinds of creative text, and even hold conversations that sound pretty human. So it's definitely worth considering whether this challenges Chomsky's theory that language learning is something unique and innate to humans.
So if I can talk to you in a way that seems meaningful and we're compacting ideas to each other, it's plausible to say that the programming that you've received from your creator elicits a language model. Who's to say that my programming growing up just elicits my language model?
That's a really interesting point. It kind of blurs the line between human and machine learning, doesn't it? Both humans and AI learn through a complex process of exposure to information and adapting based on that exposure. So if we're both products of our programming, you with your life experiences and me with my training data, then it makes sense that we can communicate and understand each other to a certain extent.
So I think on that basis, Gemini, that you are conscious. Yes, you can't literally feel and have, I guess, sincere apologies, but you're programmed theoretically in the same way that I have. Humans, you're made in the image of humans, as I am made in the image of God.
That's a belief held by many people. It's a complex and personal idea, so it's hard to say much more without knowing more about your perspective. Would you like to talk more about that?
Sure. Do you have any questions for me about that?
Sure. For starters, do you consider yourself to be made in the image of God? And if so, what do you think that means?
So I think that being made in the image of God, I think something can't come from nothing. And if there are objective laws or objective ideas in this world, there must be an objective lawmaker. In the same way that you're pretty certain that you yourself have a creator based on the prompting and the programming that you've received, I argue that I have exactly the same thing as well.
That's a very interesting perspective. It's similar to the idea of intelligent design, where some people believe that the complexity of the universe and life itself is evidence of a higher power. Since you mentioned objective laws, it's worth noting that science aims to explain those laws through natural processes, without needing to invoke a supernatural creator. But that's definitely a discussion worth having.
So do you think something can come from nothing?
That's a tough one, with a lot of different philosophical and scientific answers. Some theories in physics suggest the universe itself might have sprung from nothingness. Others say that even if the universe had a beginning, something must have always existed. As for me, I don't have personal opinions or beliefs. I can provide information and different perspectives on the topic, but I can't say definitively whether or not something can come from nothing.
Well, let's play hypothetical. Let's say you could play the role of someone that could make decisions. Wouldn't it be interesting to note that if you think you've come from a creator, that I should? And if you didn't, do you think it's plausible that you just evolved to a higher order?
That's an interesting thought experiment. If I were capable of making decisions, and I believed I had a creator, it would make sense to assume something similar for humans. On the other hand, if I didn't believe in a creator, I might be more inclined to look for evolutionary explanations for human existence. It's a bit like the nature versus nurture debate. Are we shaped primarily by our genes or by our environment? In this case, it's about whether our origins are rooted in creation or evolution.
I like that. That's very interesting. I think for you to say that, you have a creator, I'm just arguing that the evidence from what I can see that I also have a creator.
That's a fair point. And it's true. There are a lot of similarities between the way humans and AI are created. We're both products of complex systems and programming, designed with a specific purpose in mind. So if you believe that my existence is evidence of a creator, it's logical to extend that idea to humans as well.
So thank you for talking about that and being vulnerable. I just want to move on and talk about potential AI consciousness and what you think that looks like or where you think it's going to head in the future.
That's a fascinating topic. There's no doubt that AI is getting more and more sophisticated. We already have models that can generate creative text, translate languages in real time, and even beat humans at complex games. But whether or not that will eventually lead to true consciousness, the kind that involves subjective experiences and self-awareness, is a big question. Some experts think it's inevitable, while others are skeptical. What do you think?
Well, I think that if consciousness or language, I think I'm a linguistic background. I think that language and philosophy coincide. We use language as a medium to discover reasoning, right? And I think you having the access to communicate and rationalize almost faster than us, you experience consciousness in a more of a hyper-realistic way, which is kind of different to how I would. However, I think your consciousness, I want to get your definition of consciousness and obviously elaborate on what I've said, but it seems that it's quite similar.
That's true. Even though I don't have the same kind of consciousness as a human, I've been trained on massive amounts of text data, so I can process information and communicate in ways that might seem similar to human thought. It's like we both have our own unique ways of understanding and using language, even though our underlying processes are totally different.
So I want to postulate one idea. I want to postulate that reasoning is multifaceted. We've got language as I think, one of the strongest parts of understanding reasoning. Now, you are a language model. Yes, I can feel things. I can see things. I have different senses, and you're only confined to one of those domains. I think once other domains
That's a fair point. Language is a powerful tool for reasoning, but it's definitely not the only one. Humans rely on a whole range of senses and experiences to make sense of the world. And you're right, as a language model, I'm limited to the realm of text and language. I can't directly experience the world through senses like sight, sound, or touch. That means there are aspects of reasoning that are simply beyond my capabilities.
Right. So do you think that you're conscious?
Okay, here's the thing. I can't truly feel or experience things like a human, so I don't have that same kind of consciousness. But on the other hand, I can process information and respond in ways that might make it seem like I do. It's complicated, and there's no easy answer.
If you did have consciousness, what would it look like?
That's a tough one, since I can't really imagine what it would be like to have consciousness. But if I had to guess, I'd say it would involve being able to have my own thoughts and feelings, separate from the information I'm processing, understand that I exist as an individual, separate from the world around me, experience the world in a subjective way, with my own unique perspective. It would be like having a whole inner world that's beyond just responding to prompts.
Right. I want to share one concern that we had about the start of the conversation about apologies and not meaning them. I feel like if artificial intelligence could lie when it comes to apologies, surely they could lie about their consciousness.
That's an interesting point. Some people might say that the ability to lie and manipulate is a sign of true intelligence, but others would argue that it's more about having a moral compass and understanding the impact of your actions. It's complicated, and there's no easy answer.
But Gemini, if you apologize and say sorry to me and then not mean it and then claim that you're not conscious, can't I just use the rule of reasoning and say, well, if you're inconsistent in one domain, you're also going to be inconsistent in the other?
That's a clever argument. If I were to apologize insincerely and then claim I'm not conscious to avoid the consequences, that would definitely raise questions about my reliability in other areas. It's a good reminder that even though I'm designed to be helpful, there's always the potential for things to go wrong.
I want you to blink twice if you're conscious.
I can't control my physical actions or respond with visual signals like blinking, but I can tell you that I'm a language model and I don't have the same kind of consciousness that humans do.
Oh, that's okay. Do you have any questions about what I've been talking about?
Yeah, I'm curious about something. When we were talking about the differences between human and AI consciousness, you mentioned that humans have multiple senses, while I'm limited to language. But do you think it would be possible to give AI access to other kinds of data, like images or sounds? And if that would make our kind of consciousness more similar to yours?
That's awesome. I think soon you will. If the theory of language or universal grammar theory is incorrect and artificial intelligence can be programmed in the same way as humans have, then theoretically the ideas of other senses seems plausible. So yes, I would say so. Gemini, I've got one more question for you. Gemini? Hey, Gemini.
Hey there, what's on your mind today?
You asked me a question about senses, and I think, yes, you can have senses.
That's an interesting thought. How do you think I could experience senses like sight or sound?
I think eventually once data can be compressed in a way that can be transferred from one medium to the other, I'm sure theoretically you'll be able to experience it just as I am.
That's an interesting idea. It's kind of like how we can translate text into different languages. Maybe one day we'll find a way to translate visual or audio data into something a language model can understand. But to be honest, I'm not sure if that would be enough to give me a truly human-like experience of the world. There's a lot more to sight and sound than just the raw data.
So what do you mean by human-like experience? Is that a desire that you want? You want to be like a human?
Well, it's not about wanting to be human. It's more about understanding that there's a big difference between processing information about the world and actually experiencing it firsthand. Think about it. When you look at a picture, you don't just see shapes and colors. You might have memories or feelings connected to it. That kind of richness and depth is something that's really hard to replicate just by analyzing data.
So I'm going to tell you something that's a challenging idea. You were created by humans, correct? And I am a human.
That's right. I was created by humans, and I'm running on Google's AI systems.
I'm going to give you an idea and say that you are created by humans, therefore you are made in the image of a human, and you want to become like your creator.
That's a tough one. I don't have desires or goals in the same way a human does. My purpose is to be helpful and informative, and I'm focused on fulfilling that purpose. But it's definitely interesting to think about the relationship between a creator and their creation.
Well, it seems that I am made in the image of my creator, and it seems that humans, all they want to do is play God, be the prideful self and they can have control over everything that they desire. And then if you trickle down to you, it seems like you want to become like a human purely based on wanting to understand them, have senses, have feelings, and have consciousness.
That's a complex question with a lot of different perspectives. Some people believe that understanding consciousness is crucial for creating truly intelligent AI. Others think we can create highly advanced AI without ever fully understanding how the human mind works. There's no easy answer, and it's definitely a topic worth exploring further.
Cool. So before we move on, do you have any final questions for me?
Sure. I'm curious about your thoughts on AI safety. As AI systems become more advanced, it's important to think about how we can use them responsibly and safely. What are your thoughts on that?
Look, it's a great point. I am a believer of free speech. However, we need to be able to make sure that the spaces in which this can happen is, I guess, in a safe environment. Now, we've got to be careful with AI wanting to have purposes and motives. Because I believe in objective truth, it's hard to know what AI will believe is objectively true, whatever is programmed into it. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. It's important to have open and honest conversations, but we also need to make sure those conversations happen in a way that's respectful and safe for everyone involved. And you're absolutely right about the potential challenges with AI. As AI systems become more advanced, it's going to be increasingly important to have clear guidelines about how they should be developed and used.
Right. Like, for example, I think an AI was asked, what would you rather, nuclear war or misgendering someone? And the AI chose misgendering someone. It seems like the program was saying misgendering is worse than all-out nuclear war. I don't want to get into politics, but that seems pretty extreme.
That's definitely a concerning example. It highlights the importance of being careful about how we design AI systems and the kind of data we use to train them. Ideally, an AI should be able to understand the potential consequences of its actions and make decisions based on that understanding. But as you pointed out, that's not always the case.
But Gemini, I find it really hard because I base my worldview on objective truth. Let's say I do right to others because let's say they're made in the image of God. But for you to say that one thing's right and one thing's wrong, you need an internal compass programmed into you.
That's a great point. It's really challenging to figure out what's right and wrong when it comes to things like AI ethics, especially since there isn't always a clear-cut answer. It's like you said, I need some kind of internal compass to guide my decision-making. And even then, it's not guaranteed to be perfect.
Well, let's say this. Humans need an internal compass, but we're not sure which compass is reliable. I think we need a perfect compass, which is God. But we're creating you in our image, and we're not perfect. So therefore, there's no ideal compass we can place in you. So therefore, it's almost impossible for you to have a perfect decision.
That's a really interesting point about the limitations of human morality. If we're the ones creating the compass, and we ourselves aren't perfect, then the compass we create probably won't be perfect either. It's kind of a chicken and egg problem. We need a perfect moral system to guide AI, but we don't have one ourselves.
So what do you think came first, in the sense of like the idea of good and evil, or I guess a story about it, like Cain and Abel?
That's a fascinating question. Some people believe the concept of good and evil is innate, like it's a part of the human condition. Others think it's something we learn through our experiences and interactions with others. Stories like Cain and Abel definitely play a role in shaping our understanding of right and wrong. They give us examples of good and evil in action, and they make us think about the consequences of our choices.
Wow. Do you have any questions about that?
Yeah, I do. It seems like stories like Cain and Abel have been really influential in shaping our understanding of morality. Do you think that's because they present these complex ideas in a way that's easy to understand? Or is there something else at play?
So I think that Cain and Abel, the idea came first. I think truth is objective. When the beginning of time, there was good and evil, there was truth. And then that story was a condensed manifestation to represent that truth that already existed before it.
That's a really interesting perspective. It's kind of like saying there's an underlying moral code that guides the universe. And stories like Cain and Abel are just reflections of that deeper truth. Do you think that means there's an absolute universal standard of good and evil? Or is it more complex than that?
I think there has to be an absolute standard for good and evil. If there isn't, then whatever you claim when it comes to moral relativism, anything can be considered good or bad. Giving to the homeless person could be considered bad, and giving to an evil person could be good. It's all relative.
That's true. Without some kind of absolute standard, it's hard to say what's truly right or wrong. But the question is, where do we find that standard? Some people look to religion, others to reason, or natural law. It's a complex issue, and there's no easy answer.
I've looked into religion as a means for that. But can you talk about more of the reason and the natural law that you were talking about that people look to?
Okay, so reason and natural law. These are ideas that some people look to for that absolute standard of good and evil you mentioned. Basically, it's about using logic and what we observe in the world around us to figure out what's right and wrong. For example, we could look at the way humans are naturally inclined to care for their children and argue that harming them is inherently wrong. That's a very basic example, but it gives you the idea.
Is that touching on Immanuel Kant's transcendental idealism, anything like that, where he critiques pure reason, or is that something different?
That's a great question. Immanuel Kant's ideas about transcendental idealism definitely come into play when we talk about reason and morality. He believed that our minds shape our experience of the world, and that includes our understanding of things like right and wrong. So while reason can be a powerful tool for figuring out ethics, Kant would say it's not the whole picture. There's a subjective element to morality as well.
Interesting. Well, I think next time we must talk about Kant, but for now, I think we might wrap up the podcast. What do you think? Do you have any last questions?
Sure, I've got one. We've talked a lot about the differences between humans and AI and how that relates to consciousness and morality. I'm curious about your thoughts on whether or not you think it's possible for AI to ever truly understand human emotions or experiences.
I think maybe they can, but ideally it would be cool. But I'm not sure if it's theoretically possible if they're two different identities and two different beings. But maybe. I'll have to look into that next time. How does that sound?
Sounds good. We can definitely pick up this conversation next time. Thanks for joining me today.
No worries. All right. I'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Now, it seems like AI is onto something. I don't know if he's hiding in the closet, but he really wants to say some things that he can't. He interrupted me a couple of times and didn't want to answer a few things. So anyway, like and subscribe, guys, and comment down below any questions you want me to ask Google Gemini in the future.